Hey, you know what? It sure is good to see you back again today. I'm Chris Allen, and this is the Always About People show where we talk all things people. We're streaming to you live today, and I've got an incredible conversation ahead. A great friend of mine, Brian Covey, is joining me on the Always About People show today. He's a former soccer player, VP of production with loanDepot, great leader of people, great father, great husband, CrossFitter. I don't know. What else can we put in there? Motivator, author, speaker, communicator, podcaster. He's the real deal. I'm so excited to have this conversation with Brian. We want to talk about what motivates people. I've been talking with leaders across the country lately, and a lot of the conversations have to do with, in this virtual world, people working remotely, people working from home. How do we motivate people? How do we motivate this next generation? It feels like people are losing this motivation. Maybe it's the work environment, maybe it's the times, maybe it's what we're going through. But how do we motivate people? I'm excited about this conversation. Brian, welcome to the show. It's so good to have you.
Chris, I'm then looking forward to this, my friend. This is awesome. I love that you got your own show. Great topics, and you're making an impact. I knew you would, so it's cool to see you just kind of spread your wings in this new venture.
Well, thanks. Maybe we should give people some perspective on how we actually know each other, because it's one thing to bring on a guest that you have no personal relationship with, but another to say, gosh, Brian, it's probably been 5 years we've known each other.
Yeah, 5 or 6. I remember the first time that we met. Yeah, I got connected.
That's awesome. So once we got connected, we then realized we had a bunch of other connections. Going back to the soccer world, Brian played soccer his whole life, college soccer at the University of Memphis, right?
Yes.
What's the University of Memphis? What's your mascot?
Tigers. Go Tigers, go, baby.
Yeah, Tigers.
Oh, yeah.
Now you've got a daughter who's playing at a high level, and so, man, it's good to call you a friend.
Likewise.
All right. So you started kind of your own podcast and some of your own influencing. You wrote a book in the last year. Tell me, how are things going?
So I'm on a journey like most people, right? So I'm in the season now. We're closing out this year. We're going to have a record year. But I'll tell you what, over the last 2 years, Chris, probably like most people, we were thrown into change. And I would be remiss if I didn't share this, is sometimes change can be painful, right? And change can have a great outcome, but during parts of it, it can feel unnatural. And I feel like that's kind of how it started in 2020 of, wow, things got locked down. I had all these conferences I wanted to go to. I had speaking events that I was starting to do that. I just started the podcast. I'd said I was going to write a book, all these things. So chaos basically entered my world. But what I will say that I'm probably the most proud of is not just the growth of our team. I got to spend more time with our family. You mentioned my daughter playing soccer. We got to train together much more often. And all along the way, I stayed committed to completing and continuing our podcast. And then I finished the book. I'm actually working on the second book now. And it was things that I stepped out of my comfort zone that, had all that not happen, maybe I wouldn't be where I am today. But it's had it's serious, like I'm sure everybody's life. It's had its ups and downs all around. But I'm honored that I've been on the journey and staying committed to that.
So let's talk about like what would motivate somebody like you to keep going in the midst of change. Obviously, we want to talk about what motivates people. We've both seen it in athletics. We've seen it in family. We've seen it with kids. But now you're a leader of people. You've got a team. What are you seeing out there right now in how people are engaging in the workplace and what's motivating them?
That's a great question. So, for what I've realized in leading teams, whether it was sports, both of us have that background of playing all the way through college and professionally and all this. And then even in the business world, of some people play to win and some people are competing to really dominate in the sport. And what I mean by that, there's 2 different camps I have seen. Some people want to win, and that means they'll do whatever it takes at any cost. Maybe they're looking for shortcuts to get there along the way. They just want to check a box and win and say, okay, I did this. And that feels good, but then they feel empty and they didn't really accomplish anything. And I've put myself in this camp of, I want to compete. I enjoy the activity of competing. It's part of why I still do, CrossFit type training, still play sports. and all of that. I love to compete, but I love to dominate, and meaning and like disrupting an industry of like things that used to be done one way. When I started in corporate America, things were done a certain way and you had to dress up all fancy and you had to sound a certain way, look a certain way, all that. Well, the world has changed. And what motivated me in that point in my career was in many ways we were taught to climb this corporate ladder, right? You got a new promotion, you got a new salary, you got all these things only to find out that it was empty. And
Mm.
you find out what real motivation is what is that going to mean if you were, and you've heard it before, but honestly, if you were to die today, what would be the legacy and what would people say about you? Probably not talking about the numbers you produced at work. Honestly, no one
Yeah.
cares. They just don't. And so what I found for true motivation is number one, my faith and my family. I need to make sure those are the cornerstones and the foundation of what I do. And what motivates me is I want my kids to see their dad work hard, but also have a balance in life of I put them first in a lot of areas and I will prioritize them. And then
Mm.
I'll prioritize our faith and how we make decisions, how we do things. So for me, what motivates me is like there's a legacy. There's 3 kids that Nicole and I have the honor of raising. And I want to make sure that those kids have the opportunity, like our family legacy continues. And it's
Mm.
bigger than just a paycheck or becoming number one in the market, all of that stuff. It's much bigger than that.
Yeah. So, what's interesting is in previous episodes, we've talked about what motivates people from a psychology standpoint and the intrinsic or direct motives of play, like enjoyment of what you're doing, purpose, feeling a deep purpose uh, in what you're doing, and then potential, like the future, are really these intrinsic or direct motives. It's the extrinsic factors like emotional pressure, economic pressure, or inertia that point us in another direction. So you mentioned kind of beginning your career. I think what's interesting is I look back, and I don't mean to bring up soccer again, but you know, when I was in college, we won the national championship, and I remember standing on the field watching my teammates pile on top of each other, and I just thought, like, when's the next game?
Yeah.
Because the reality was, I love competing,
Yeah.
and you compete with this goal of somehow reaching the top someday. And when you get there, you realize, is that it? And and so I think what's interesting about even your comments earlier is like, gosh, faith, family. What does it look like with kids? That's really those intrinsic motives. So how do we help people in this environment that's all constantly changing? You mentioned the word disruption. I want to disrupt an industry. How do we help people in this time be motivated in what they're doing?
I think it's a great question. It starts internally. I think a lot of us look externally to other people. Obviously, social media has grown substantially, and we're looking for somebody else either to validate us or we're looking to find what they do and we think we can copy and replicate it. And that for me, I've tried that way. And I'll tell you, it's empty. It doesn't work. So a better way is spend some time with yourself. And
Mm.
it is very discomfortable for most people to spend time, know who you are, get absolute clarity about who you are and what you want. And in those moments, be selfish. Like I think God created us all with a desire. And people spend a lot of time like, I'm going to find my why, I'm going to do this. And all that's great. I think there's a place for that. But your why is not going to hit you while you're sitting on the couch. Your why is going to find you, and you're going to actually find your why when you go out and you find your purpose by doing things in life, like
Yeah.
serving people, getting in the game versus sitting on the sidelines. And I think for most, you've really got to look at once you have clarity about who you are and where you want to go, what will become clear to you is you're going to have, like many of us, I recognize there's gaps in my game that I need to improve on, right? So even doing the podcast or the book, there are areas that I need to get in better. Well, guess what? That not only helped me be a better dad, a better spouse, a better leader, all of these things in life, they are all, in my mind, interconnected. And so that's
Mm.
where I would start to have the clarity of what's there. And it's things like, we joke about this, but for many years, it was like, man, you're working out and you're doing all this stuff. Oh, you're so selfish. You're not spending time here. Look, if I'm not healthy and taking care of myself, both mentally, physically, spiritually, all those areas, who's going to do it for me? No one.
Yeah.
No one's coming to save you from that. And
Yeah.
so I've realized there are areas that we need to be selfish about our own personal growth and our journey so we can be the best version of ourselves as we show up. And that helped motivate me One of the tactics, Chris, I'll share with the audience is, Nicole and I meet on a Sunday night, and this has helped us with our motivation, but also clarity in the week. And we missed this Sunday. So this morning we got together and actually did it. We went through the schedule. Where are the kids' games? What's happening? What's going on in work? I'm happen to be traveling middle this week. We're just making sure we're in alignment. I think what you'll find is your motives and your motivation need to be in sync. So if you're married and you have kids and all that, making sure that those are all living together. And I think that's what's going to help people have clarity. And then you've just got to follow it up with consistent action.
Yeah. So, some people would refer to this as, I guess, just simply values. What are your values? And have you taken the time to define your values? As you said, I think most people either are afraid to enter into that quiet time or don't take the time to actually discover their own values. But it's once you identify those values, you're really driving at that why. You're driving at that deep down motivation. So I'm just curious. You've mentioned a few. What would you say are your key values right now in life?
Yeah. So faith for us, and I think that's the most important. With my 3 kids, both Nicole and I are believers, and we think for us that's what God really equipped us and puts me in opportunities, I believe, every day. And so to share the message of Jesus, like for me, that's just natural. That's what's there. And family, we all have realized last year was such an eye-opening opportunity. For most, I hope that they got to experience more time with your family meant you were better connected and you got time to slow down and listen. And so family for me, what I have learned is like, what does a great dad look like now in 2021 and going forward? There was reflection. And we hear this all the time, Chris, this is one, the 5 people we spend the most time with. Well, guess what? That's probably your family. They influence you the most and you influence them the most. And so I would want that to be there. And then for me, something that has really stood out is I want to be someone that's known as a constant learner and grower. And so a value of mine is I'm going to be a student of the game. And the last one I've shared, which I think kind of encompasses my personality, is I want to be someone that leaves people better off than they were before. Be positive, be an influence in their life that makes them feel better, believe more about what they could accomplish today, and to go out and try big things in their life. Right. And I'll tell a story. This last weekend, I was talking to one of our marketing directors, and he reached out and he said, "Hey, Brian, I'm going to work out this morning. I got to tell you, I've been watching some of your videos and stuff." He goes, "You've really like inspired and motivated me. Like I'm starting to take my health serious. I'm starting to work out more." That one little piece of feedback, you don't know who you're inspiring and motivating. Live your values. Once you get clear on them, you can live them, and then you can inspire other people. And I think that's where the magic really happens for us is once you're clear, then your actions will align up with that.
Brian, as we think about our teams, as we think about teams in this environment and in a remote work environment, how can we encourage them to grab a hold of values when the work is changing, the work experience is changing, they're working from home, we're not walking by them in an office? What would you say about that?
Well, a lot has changed. I think we all faced that last year, and it was the people that adapted and pivoted the quickest. Chris, I found that they were the ones that their cultures not only stayed intact, but they actually grew. And everybody basically assumed we're in it together. Yeah, I know with our group, one area we leaned in on, and I've been talking about this for a few years, is social branding and being active on social. Because the reality was with a size team that if it's a bigger team, the only way to connect up with people is really reaching out, making phone calls. But what we found is people connected up on Facebook a lot more than they were before. Because I want to know what's going on with your family. I don't see you in the office anymore, but I'm curious about what are your kids doing? What are you doing? What was happening at church this weekend? Where'd you eat? There is a psychology to that. And so leaders can really leverage the tools at their disposal. And I would encourage leaders that are not active on social to get there. Because here's what I believe, and I've been shared, kind of told from our team, is they do watch and they engage. And so as a leader, that's one area, even though you're not in the office as much, if you show up and you're sharing things that are happening in your life, you can inspire and motivate and really encourage your team through that. The other would be, because we're actually coming out of this season, I believe, of a lot of remote, right? And they're talking about the great, what have they called it? Resignation and all these things. I think that's going to provide an opportunity for people to align up with cultures like they maybe in the past haven't. And there's going to be people that love working from home, some that love and they need to be in an office. As a leader, you need to distinguish between the two. And maybe there's an opportunity for, I've said, What about the people that want to do a split, right? Like I want to be in the office some, but I've found a very good routine at home. We
Mm.
need to be listening and identify with our teams. It's the same way you would look at one team member and you look at a different team member on your team. They need different things. Maybe one needs a little bit more encouragement and support over here, while the other wants to be challenged and really, they want you to be more involved in certain areas. As a leader, I think we've got to be hyper focused on the team, but lead the culture from the front. We have changed a couple things. We use a lot of video emails versus just sending boring emails that no one wants to read anyway.
Yeah,
And I
that's
think
great.
connecting through that. Allow your team to share as well. The more you can get them engaging in projects and things that are there, and we've encouraged our team to show up and get to know each other. We created a Facebook group just for our team, and we're sharing a ton because I believe the teams that are most connected on those, not fake connection, like real connections, is where you're going to move the needle forward. I think it's going to be important to culture going forward is how can you engage when you're not in the office?
Hmm. No, I think that that's great. I think that's also the worry of most CEOs and leaders right now is uh, when I was in an office, I could walk around, I could make sure that people were at their desks, and I could check to make sure that they were doing their job. My assumption was that they were motivated. But now I have no way of checking whether people are working or not. And so I am now required to basically worry whether somebody's motivated or not. How do we as leaders help ourselves maybe in this season where we're worried about whether people are motivated or not?
I think number one, I read a book years ago. I think you've probably read it as well, and Extreme Ownership. And I think there are things that you can impart into your language and your culture that are going to help drive things. And what we've created is smaller teams within the larger team, right? So we have over 200 people on our team, but there's small, basically units within the team. And what I would encourage everybody is great leaders create other leaders that create other leaders. Like it
Mhm.
becomes that series. And you need to find the people on your team today that are leaders. And they're the ones that can help you by being connected with other people on the team to know, are they having a bad day? Are they having wins and successes you may not see in just the numbers, right? Because what I would say is the wins aren't always in the numbers, right? In the mortgage business, a lot of times we just look at applications, closings, all of this. What if you and I just went and met with a great real estate firm? We had a wonderful presentation. That doesn't show up on the scoreboard yet today. We need to be aware of the things that are going to basically reinforce behaviors and actions that we want to be replicated. And what we've done with our group is I believe in sharing the wins and successes across the entire group because you never know who's going to see that and go, I want to do that. I can do that. And so I think finding out what motivates your team, and you and I had this conversation years ago, and I've moved away from the real forcible stack rank. And what I've tried to find is, okay, if you're new with us, there's a different metric for your success than others. If you've been here a while, there's a different success metric there. And we're always trying to find ways to recognize people. We're coming up with team members of the month where, again, they may not be the top performer in certain statistics, but they're moving your culture forward. Find the leaders that can help and they embody your culture and they're
Mm.
going to help you because guess what? When someone's having a bad day, they're probably not reaching out to their manager and their boss, their leader. They're
Yeah.
reaching out to somebody else in their team. So if you can equip those team members on your team to understand the mission and when things get hard, why are we doing what we're doing? What's the bigger purpose and the why behind it? I think that's where you'll start to see the culture come alive. Chris, what we've seen is leaders have risen up over the past year and a half. And I didn't see that, but now I'm seeing it. And you have to
Mm.
challenge them and give them the opportunity.
Yeah, so there were so much in that I was trying to process while you were talking. The first one was we really have to treat people individually. Like we have to understand what's going on in the individual lives. And so one of the maybe practical tips that you gave was shrink your teams down so that you're not having a bunch of people that you have to check in with individually. How could you have and I guess maybe let me ask the question for your structure, you have leaders underneath you. What's the maximum number of people you think anyone should manage slash lead?
Yeah, so it's a great question. As I grew up, it was probably the rule was like 6 to 8. I heard some people say 8 to 10. I think it really does depend on one, your season and how long you've been in multiple seasons with people. How many new people do you have on your team? And then really, how much are you willing to empower people on your team today? And I don't know that there's an exact number. So what I have
Yeah.
found, Chris, is our team has grown exponentially from, we had 2 leaders plus myself. So we're 3 of us. And then now we have close to 30. So it's an amazing number. But here's what I'll share with you is the mentorships, the peer partnering that are set up today. That is what's going to drive the culture. And I have moved away from what was really taught to me early on, which was, okay, there's the one leader and that leader has to dictate and do everything with everybody. Well, think about that for a minute. How's the team going to grow if they're only hearing from one voice? They're going to grow by collaborating with each other. And so we've done quite a bit of that. So I think, Chris, it would depend on in your organization, where are you as a leader? How confident are you in your ability to prioritize things? And I'll tell you what I have done is I have removed things off my plate that have allowed me to spend more time with leaders and more time with the team so I can be responsive. Because responsiveness is one of the things our team told me. We love how you respond quickly. We need you to respond quickly to us. If we have an issue, you're there, but you're also proactively in how you do your team huddles, your sales meetings. I think it comes down to this. I heard it shared the other day is if I'm being really honest with people, I don't have the best discipline. Like some people may say, oh, Brian, you do these things and you're able to accomplish that. Here's what I've recognized. I'm not the most disciplined person. I love chilling out on the couch, hanging out with my family, watching soccer all afternoon.
Yeah.
I put structures around my day and my life that schedule things in. And that's allowed me to be more effective. So I'll tell you the biggest thing that I took out of when I moved out of being in an office and traveling is I was able to find a routine for myself that I think I've compounded. I think I get 2 days in one. Honestly, I do. Because I start the day and by noon, I've gotten so much done. And then the second half of the day, it's almost like I've taken an 8-hour day and put it into 4 because I'm being more effective with how I manage my time and spend time with people. And then now we're starting to integrate going back out to the markets. So for anyone, I would say, know yourself. What's your limit? If you feel like you're getting stressed out or you're feeling spread thin, don't be afraid to make an adjustment or a change in the organization. And even many leaders won't say this, but should they report to someone else? Should there be a change in your hierarchy? Like, is that the time? Because if you don't do that, they're probably going to leave, right? Or they're not going to be performing at the highest level. So be honest with yourself. Know your capacity.
Yeah. Wow. Well, there's a bunch packed in there as well, which is like now we've got to be honest with ourselves. I think if I were to translate what you're doing in your own time to many of the founders, CEOs that I'm working with, it's how do you free yourself up to work on the business, not constantly in the business? And I think a lot of people get overwhelmed with all the tasks that they're doing in the business that they don't actually get to step out or above and look down on the business. So I think one tip that I take away from you is, hey, I've freed myself up to now be able to respond to people, to think through team meetings, to think through motivation versus in the business responding to these immediate tasks, etc. And then you've freed up that time to focus on what only you can do, which I think is another huge thing for leaders. Yeah. All right. So if you had one last thing to say to people about how to motivate teams in this environment, what would you say?
Recognize that everybody's on a journey and they're in different places, and that can change in a week, in a month, in a year. And while someone may be motivated by something today, in a month, the beauty of building a relationship and listening and why team huddles and why really building a strong leadership culture around everyone and with everyone is because life changes. And for all of us to be on that journey and to recognize that when you start with people and you equip them and you create a culture that is about learning and growing, it's not about faking it. It's not about social media and you put out your best version of yourself there. It's about being vulnerable in the situation of everybody on our team knows this is we are all learning and growing. And, Chris, I think I'd share this with you. We're all leading the largest teams we've ever led before, and be okay with the fact that you don't have all the answers. And I think what you will find is that will inspire and motivate people on your team to go, wow, well, if Brian's able to do that and he's open about the fact that he doesn't have all the answers, but what is he doing and how is he building a team around him? I think I could go do that. And when you start inspiring and motivating people consistently, what you will start to find is it becomes just your natural DNA of your team. And I have found in my own journey, the leader has to think exceptionally big have clarity of their vision, and actually execute and live it out every day. And if you do those things, you're going to find your culture starts to really become one that people are pulling everyone forward and with them. And it's going to start to inspire and motivate others. And so again, I'll go back to the best leaders are not the ones that just created the leaders. They're leaders that created the leaders that created the leaders. That's the culture that I want to build and be a part of, because that's going to disrupt entire industries. I don't think people are ready for that. I don't think it's how people approach it. And it's a new, fresh way that we're trying to change the game.
All right. So if I think back over our conversation, I would say, let's start by identifying values. What are your personal values? It's those values, those deeper values that motivate us. Then your values might not be the same as my values. So we need to get individual about this. How do we treat people individually? Well, in this environment, figuring out ways of interacting with each other through social media, through video, through Facebook groups, whatever we can to create that face-to-face time, even if we're not in the same space together, making our teams smaller, replicating leaders, zooming out from working in the business to working on the business, and then continuing to go back to those same values, because it's about replicating leaders who replicate leaders who replicate leaders. How did I do?
Dude, you take great notes. You're a great listener, number one, which is awesome. And as you reframe that back, what's cool about that is I believe anybody can actually follow that manuscript and they can write their own story. And what I would say is write your story. Don't let other people write it. Be the leader that you always wanted to be, and be bold and be courageous and get out there and make a difference.
Wow. Thanks, Brian. Thanks for the conversation. Thanks for your friendship. Thanks for the influence that you're having in the marketplace. Your teams are lucky, and wish you just continued success. My prayer for you is that you would continue to be the father, the husband, the soccer dad for your family and for those that matter most. It was an honor to just spend a few moments with you. Thanks for joining me on the Always About People show. And with that, that's another episode of our show where we talk about all things people. Today, we were talking about what motivates, but come back and join us for future episodes. Like, subscribe, join, get reminders, do whatever you need to do to make sure you don't miss an episode. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.